In this video, I interview Chad Carson. Chad is the author of one of the most influential books on real estate investing, called Retire Early with Real Estate. Chad is also an 18-year veteran of the real estate industry. He has seen the markets go through the ups and the downs, and he has seen his business not only survive, but thrive. So he's the perfect person to talk about this topic, and I can't wait to share his interview with you guys. But first, if we're just meeting, my name is Vitaly Volpov. I'm a practicing attorney, an active real estate investor myself, and also part owner of a real estate brokerage in upstate New York. On this channel, I discuss relevant legal concepts as well as best strategies and tips for real estate investing and personal finance. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so that YouTube notifies you of all my future content. If you enjoyed the content in this video, hit the like button and comment down below. All right, Chad, thanks a lot for coming on the channel, man. I really appreciate it. For those people who don't know you, why don't you give a little bit of a background about yourself, what you do now, and what your journey has been up to this point?
Sure. So thank you for having me, first of all. I live in Clemson, South Carolina. So just geographically, for people who are not familiar with it, I'm halfway between Charlotte, North Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, and the southeastern part of the United States, kind of the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. And sort of the way I got here, I have a portfolio of rental properties. So a business partner and I together have buy and hold rentals. A good number of those, over half now, are college student rentals because we're in a small college town, kind of a unique town because it's about 15,000, 17,000 people. And as a university, this really a large university, Clemson University, right next to the town. And so it's really beautiful place on a lake near the mountains, but also a small place. So we're very focused on the student rental niche, and then also some houses that faculty members rent and other support staff rent as well. But that's where I am currently, but it's been a growth process. For the last 18 years, I've been a real estate investing professional, got into it full time. And when I first started, it wasn't rental properties as much. I was having to make a living doing that because I just graduated from college, and I was fortunate not to have any student debt. I played football in college and got a scholarship, so I didn't have any debt to pay off. But I decided to take a stab at just flipping houses and trying to make money doing that. And it started off very, very slowly, just trying to find deals for other people, make a little bit of money here and there, living in my parents' house back at home in Noonan, Georgia for a while, and then living in what would become my business partner. He had a spare bedroom that I lived in for a while. And then, so it just, started that way, finding deals, flipping houses here and there. And that grew, fortunately, over time, and sort of transitioned into just flipping houses to make a living to also owning some rental properties, which is mainly what I do now.
Gotcha. So how did you end up getting into real estate in the first place? What was the reason, or was there a catalyst for that?
I tell people it's sort of an accident. Like I was fortunate that my father and my mom was a dentist, so was a medical professional, and my dad had rental properties. So they had the 1-2 punch of, she made good income, he was in the business of buying some properties that they could retire off of eventually and build wealth. And so I was able to observe them. So that's a really fortunate thing. And he had some books on his shelf. And so when I was in college, I was a biology major, and I was applying to med schools when I was finishing up. But I was just kind of worn out and tired from playing football. And I was like, I just want to take a break for a year or two. And I thought about, I love studying abroad and speaking Spanish and speaking languages. And I wanted to do that some, but also I knew I didn't want to just go into grad school, right? And so I said, why don't, just for a year or two, I'll try to make a little bit of money learning how to do real estate, and it won't hurt me, and I'll have that skill set, and then I'll go back to the real world, go back to the medical school or whatever I choose to do. And I jumped into it, dipped my toe in it, and realized that it was kind of cool not having to work for anybody else, not having a set schedule, riding around in my car looking for deals. And entrepreneurship, as much as there was uncertainty, you didn't have a paycheck, I loved the flexibility and the freedom of doing it, and just became addicted to it basically, and said, I'm not going back in that box now. I'm just going to stay and be an time.
Makes sense. So the biggest obstacle that I hear people raise when they say, they can't get into real estate is how expensive real estate is. When you were just starting, this was probably what, 2004, 2005?
Yeah, 2003 or four, right around
3 or 4. You were just out of college. Did you have money set aside? Did family help? Or how did you get financing for your first few flips and few deals?
Yeah, so family helped in terms of knowledge for sure. I was able to, call up my father and say, "Hey, have you run into a problem like this?" So having a mentor and my dad was really helpful. But in terms of money, I was in a different town where I started, so I didn't do any kind of financial deals with my family. Just wanted to go off on my own. But I was able to go and talk to a business professor at my Clemson University. I took some business classes because I didn't know anything about business at all. I was trying to figure this thing out, and he was also a real estate investor. I learned during class, and so I sort of bugged him after class and followed him around a little bit and asked him if he'd let me ride around and look at some of his properties. And one thing led to another. He saw that we were out. I had a plan to try to buy some properties with my business partner. And I told him, I said, "Look, I'm finding these deals. I think the number's going to be okay. This is a foreclosure." I showed him an example, but I said, I don't have any money to buy the deal, but I heard there's some way that maybe we could partner. You have some money, I don't. And we figured out on that very first deal, we did what we now call like a credit partnership, where he essentially went to the local bank, and he put the down payment, he paid for the repairs, and the banker let us tag along. Like we were on the loan, but we didn't hurt it, we didn't help it, but we bought that deal together. And first deal was a flip. So we fixed it up, we flipped it. He put up all the money, we found it, we did all the work, and then we split the profits with him. So it was a 3-way split of the profits. That was the very first one. It sort of evolved from there, but the structures evolved. But the idea of partnering with other people who had the money, as long as I could bring the deal, was the consistent theme. So there's lots and lots of money out there. It's kind of hidden below the surface, but there are people who are looking for deals, looking for returns, looking for safety, and they're in self-directed IRAs. They're in people who are been investors for 20, 30 years, and they're just too busy, or they just don't want to go do all the work that a young or new investor would do. And so if you can figure out a way to connect those two people, the people with the lazy money and the people with the hustle and the kind of go and find the deals, there's always a way to put a deal together if you can find that.
So is the best way to do that just talk about what you're interested in, that you're interested in real estate, that you're in real estate, and just talk to every single person you know, and then, if some interest is cultivated, then you explore that further. Is that the way you would suggest?
Yeah, I mean, it's a slow and steady way, but that's what I've done. This professor I was taking a class. So I knew I was interested in real estate, and I think you have to not be afraid to take that step and tell people what you do. Even when you're new, like I was new, I have never done anything, but I learned something. So I could talk about what I learned. I could talk about the formulas that I learned. And that's what I did with him. I said, here's the formula. It was essentially looking at the after repair value of a property, taking 70% of that and saying, all right, if I could buy a property, it's 70% of the full value minus the repairs, minus the closing cost. That seemed like a pretty good deal because I could flip the property and make a profit margin and still sell it. And so I took that formula. I didn't know anything else besides that. I took that formula to this person and said, would that work? Like, could you find a way to put up the money? And his answer was, yeah, we'll figure that out. And I've had similar conversations with other people in the past at local real estate meetings, local, not social clubs, civic clubs, things like that. If you go to a chamber of commerce meeting, or just family members, some people say don't mix family and money, but I had a conversation at the Thanksgiving dinner with my grandmother right when I started this business. And she was worried about me. She was like, "Oh man, Chad, you didn't go to medical school. What are you doing? This is bad." And so I was telling her, I was like, "No, I'm doing just fine. We got some property." She said, "Well, where are you getting the money? You're 23 years old. You can't do this." And I said, "Well, I got another guy who's loaning me money at 10% interest. And I'm using that money to buy these properties." And she's like, 10% interest? You can't pay. So it was like one thing after another. You can't pay 10% interest. You're going to go out of business. And it was funny to have that conversation. But then later on after dinner, she was thinking about it and she said, "Chad, you're paying 10% interest to people. I have this money that I inherited from her brother, and she's like, I don't like where it is in the stock market right now. Like, could I invest in one of your deals?" My grandmother, just from Thanksgiving meal, and she had it was $40,000 or $50,000 or something that she had inherited. And so that's an example. Like, if you talk about what you do it in an educational way, you do it in an interesting way. Some people talk about the weather. I don't talk about much about the weather. I talk about real estate. I talk about financial independence, and those kind of things come up whenever you start having that conversation.
And I know exactly where you're coming from too, because that's kind of been my experience. I'm obviously newer to the game than you are. I haven't been investing for as long as you have, but that's exactly how I've been able to get private financing, which was talking to relatives, friends, colleagues, acquaintances, and not being pushy with them and not really asking for money from them, but telling them what I'm doing and, expressing my knowledge and explaining what I know. And then also talking about some of the returns that could be made or other lenders that have already lent to me are making. And so I think that's a great strategy for anyone who's looking to raise some private capital for sure.
Yep. And find a way that's natural to you. Like I've always, even today, like I feel like my most natural place as a teacher. Like I just like teaching. My favorite people in high school and college were teachers and coaches, people. And so if you just play the role that is natural to you, if you're a teacher, teach. If you're an explainer, like an analytical person, show the analyzing. If you're a helper and you're just really good at serving people, just share it in that way. I mean, and you don't have to be somebody you're not. Even as a new investor, you can be brand new, you can be honest, you can be authentic. And I think that's your secret weapon. I know I did, I would always try to be something a little bit, I'm a 24-year-old kid. I can't really do this, or I don't have the credibility, but you got to own what you got. Like whoever you are, however you are, some of us have more obstacles than other people. I know I loved hearing your story and all the different obstacles, people in your family who had to overcome to get where you are. Like we've all, we had different places of starting. Mine was a pretty easy place to start compared to with a lot of people, but use your story, use where you are to explain that. And I think that story is it's not marketing. It's not promotion. It's just, you be yourself, have a little bit, you got to have some knowledge and some education clearly, but that's what attracts people. There's so much fakeness out there that when you're just a real person and you're authentic, that's what people are looking for to invest their money.
Exactly. So do you remember what your profits or numbers were on that first deal, or is that too long ago for you?
I remember. Yeah, we bailed ourselves out by doing a bunch of manual labor. Like my business partner and I were out there scraping water, what do you call it, wallpaper off of walls and cleaning out the crawl space. But we ended up making, I think, about 12 grand when it was all said and done. So we split 12 grand 3 ways.
Yep.
4, 4, 4, and 4, and it was not a lot of money, but I looked at it as we made a ton of mistakes. We hired the wrong painter, we hired the wrong carpet guy, we did all these things wrong, and we still made some money. And I was ecstatic. This is amazing. It took 6 months of my life and made a bunch of mistakes and still made a little bit of money. And it gave us the confidence that we could do this. And we had a couple more deals after that where we made similar money or better, but did a little bit easier.
And what was the progression like? So from that first deal to the next few years, what was your investing experience like after that?
It was mainly it was pretty slow the first 2 years, and we did, I think, 3 or 4 deals per year in both of those years. My evolution was I started off, I have to take a step back, that first deal that I did personally was my partnership that I'm in now, and that's kind of that iteration of it. The year before that, when I first graduated from college, I basically moved back into my house in Noonan, Georgia, outside of Atlanta, and I was just what's called a bird dog, or a deal finder for my dad in Noonan, Georgia. And I would go out and knock on doors, talk to realtors, send letters out, and so I was making a finder's fee every time he bought a property, so a couple $1,000. And I was able to learn the business that way while making a little bit of money with very low risk. So I liked doing that. That was a really good start. The next 2 years after that were just me using those skills I found and buying the deals myself. And so flipping the properties. So that was sort of the evolution. It was learn to find deals with very low risk, taking one little piece of the business, which was deal finding, and then building off of that. So I knew how to find deals now. Now why not go borrow the money myself, flip the houses, make a bigger margin instead of making $2 grand. I can hopefully make, a piece of a $30,000 profit, make half of that. And now I can make a $15,000 profit for my efforts instead of a $2,000 profit. And so it was more of a grow my flipping business, fix and flip business to start off. But somewhere along the way, I think it was 2005 or so, a couple of years into it, we bought our first rental property that we were able to put $5,000 down on a single family house, and we still own it today. We got some seller financing, and we were able to use some creative financing to do that, to have a small down payment. And but it's turned into a really good rental property as we've kept it, and it's grown over time.
How many rental units did you say you have now?
That's around 110 units.
Okay. So you've added a few
Yeah.
in recent years, because I think I've watched you on some Bigger Pockets podcasts and other places where you had around 90 something before.
Correct. Yeah.
So-
And long term, I don't know where we'll end up. It's just been fortuitous in the market, looking at properties. We've gotten into more of the multi-unit game now.
Mm-hmm.
So, we made one acquisition that had 28 units at one time. And then we've made other acquisitions last year, had a 14-unit building, and another one that was a 6-unit with a duplex next door. So when you start buying kind of an aggregate, you have maybe one roof or a few roofs with a lot of different units underneath it. So I think that was an eye-opener for me, because over the years I'd done a lot of smaller deals, single-family houses, mobile homes, and it took the exact same amount of time for me to negotiate those, to buy them, the same skill sets. And so the last 5 or 6 years, we've just found a niche that worked pretty well for us, buying older multifamily properties within biking or bus distance to the campus, and that where we could do something like grow the rent, or change the cosmetics of the property, or change the management structure around, do a value add is what that's called and in the real estate multi-unit world. And those have been a good way to use the same skills we had on the small deals, but apply them to bigger numbers. And it's just been a next step for us.
Do you still do any flips?
Not that many. We've got our eyes on a few, but it's more where we've evolved personally, and this is kind of goes back to the financial independence topic, is that I'm not as interested in doing what I did the first 10 years. I'm glad I did it, but I was in the door knocking and the talking to people and having 5 appointments per week, making offers on properties. And I love that. It was fun for what it was when it was, but I'm more in I want to just take a step back. I want to travel. I like to make content, podcasts, YouTube stuff. I'm having fun with that. Travel with my family. And so the flipping's great, but it takes a lot of attention to detail. I'm sure you've been there too.
Yeah.
In terms of just paying attention to your contractors and watching what's happening and sharing with them what the vision for the property is. So what we're more interested in now is having the rental properties, sometimes partnering with other people who we trust locally, who can go find the deal for us. It might be a broker who has more flips than he or she can handle, and they have this extra deal that they don't have the money for, and we put up the money, they find the deal, we split the profits somehow after we flip. Like, I like those kind of deals where I can bring some of my knowledge and money, or our money and knowledge, to the table and help them with something that gets a deal that they wouldn't have done otherwise, and that we wouldn't have done. And it's kind of like going back to the very first deal we did. That person who had more experience put up the money, and it's just this virtuous circle that there are people who were borrowers before are now lenders, and that's the way real estate investing works.
So now that you've been in the game for 18 years, you've been through one downturn, right? 2008, 2009. We just had another one, which we'll talk about in a second, but I want to ask you about that first downturn and how you weathered that, and where were you? Were you doing mostly flips at the time? Were you already in some multifamilies, and did you get hurt by that, or did you kind of sail through it?
We didn't sail through it. It was scary. It was a learning lesson, and I kid about it. We have a lot of scars to prove it. From there, we survived it, but we have scars. So the lead up to that was when anybody asked me to predict what's happening next, I just tell them my 2007 story, so they know they shouldn't listen to my predictions. But we were flipping a lot of houses still and making good money on flips. We were also buying more rental properties at that point, and we had 33 closings in 2007. So some of those were multiple properties, flips. Some of them were rental properties, but we were humming in terms of like buying a lot of properties. There's positives and negatives to that. The negative that is obviously because of the juxtaposition of what we know now. 2007, end of the year, 2008 was when the whole thing happened, and things started falling apart, led by the real estate market. So the real estate market changed dramatically. More importantly, the financing market changed dramatically. So getting people loans for 2008 and 2009 was kind of difficult. So if you're flipping houses and the market's falling, how do you figure out what the price is? Eventually it stabilized, but it just overnight you got to change your strategy. So that's part one. That's a negative. The other negative we had though was by growing so fast, you sometimes get ahead of yourself and you stop paying attention to enough details. So we had some properties that we made 50 grand on, 60 grand, flipping a house, did well. We had other properties that were really good rentals, long-term with solid seller financing or low interest loans. But we had some where we underestimated the repairs, where we thought it was going to be 15 or 20,000 and ended up being 30,000 or 35,000. So there's a $10,000 or $15,000 shortfall that you weren't counting on. We also had some that we thought we were too aggressive on the rental numbers and we really didn't have as much cash flow, or we might even have negative cash flow on some properties. And often because we underestimated the cost of capital expenses or the cost of vacancies in a worse location where there's a lot of turnover. So those were all challenges we had. The positive that was going up to that, we always lived frugally and we didn't spend a lot of our money that we made. I pretty much kept my college lifestyle from 2023 to, that whatever that was in 2007 when I was 27. So the positive was we had a lot of cash set aside and we needed it to be able to withstand some of the turnovers and those mistakes we made. And so I think those were the scars. The scars were having properties that didn't really perform that well and then having to transition the business to being a buy and hold business 100%. Where we were before, were able to flip to kind of make some money. We had to make money on the income. We had to make money on the management. We had to figure out how we owner finance some properties, which was a little bit of a niche that we got into, where there was a down payment assistance program in 2009, I believe, where they would pay cash for first-time home buyers who bought a property. So we would work with some of our renters who were good payers and teach them how to become a homeowner. And we said, we'll carry the financing for you if you put 10% down. So all sorts of little adaptations like that where we were able to pivot, but a lot of it depended on being able to withstand the shock of those mistakes that we made by having cash reserves. And so that was just a really big lesson. This informed me to today as well. Like when, it's anytime you don't know what the future is going to bring. And when you have uncertainty, having a conservative balance sheet where you have plenty of cash, where your loans don't have any big surprises. Like if you have a big balloon note coming where you have to pay off a $200,000 loan or a $500,000 loan at any point in the next 3 to 5 years, that's dangerous. Like because the bank might tell you today that they're going to give you another loan, but what happens if the credit market dries up? That's what we learned firsthand. And we were fortunately had very few bank loans. We had almost all private loans, seller financing, lease options, a lot of the things we had to do because we started not as people with W-2 income and great credit. We had to do those things early on, but that surprisingly helped us and saved us during the downturn because we had just individuals we could talk to and say, hey, we're changing, but it's good. Could we extend that another few years? Could you, instead of paying a 10% interest loan and just keep revolving it over and over again, could we do a stable interest only loan at 6% and just pay you for the next 5 to 7 years? And a lot of them were very happy with that because the stock market was going all over the place. And so we have now people who for 15 years we've been paying interest only on some of their retirement accounts, and they're extremely happy with that, and it pays for their grocery bills, and it's worked for us as well.
That's great. One question I have as we're talking, so because you have a partnership, so it's you and a business partner, I assume, well, you don't have to tell me if you feel comfortable with it, but
that's fine.
My partnership with my business partner is 50-50, so I'll just talk about me. And so for us, whenever we buy a property, the way I hold title in that property is through an LLC. Were you using entities, or did you use some other structure to hold your rentals?
Same thing, almost the exact same setup with an LLC and a 50. Just like if people don't understand what that is, it's just you're an attorney, so you can explain a little bit better. But we had a corporation called an LLC that owned the properties, and then we owned those together. We owned the corporation together.
Actually, good point. So if anyone who doesn't know exactly how that works, limited liability company is what LLC stands for. It's a fictional entity created under state law, whatever state you're in, and it can transact business. It can do, pretty much anything that a business person can do, including holding property. But when you have partnerships, when you have multiple people going in on a deal, one of the ways you can hold title is, instead of having your names on title, is to have that one LLC, that one entity hold title, and then you own pieces of that entity. And that's how a lot of investors, sophisticated investors, Chad here and many, many others are investing in real estate. But the reason I bring that up and the reason I wanted to ask you this, so you mentioned balloon payments. in my area, and I know this may be geographically specific, the local commercial lenders and even probably the larger commercial lenders, they right now anyway, they definitely have a reset. They call it sometimes a hard reset, sometimes it's a soft reset in 5 or 10 years on the loan that you take out on that property, in a commercial loan. So a lot of my real estate, even though we have pretty good equity in it, in the way we've purchased it, but it's going to have a reset. And some of it is within 5 years or sooner. Mm-hmm. Is that a concern? And have you dealt with that concern yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's very common. So I'm not saying that's not that. Most commercial bankers I've dealt with have told me the same thing. Like, we'll try to negotiate and push back. Hey, they'll give me 7 years, or 10 years might be like the absolute max. So it is very typical. It's also very typical in the non-real estate world, like in the just corporations loaning each other money. And here's the negative of it and the risk, which we just talked about a little bit. But I'll talk about the risk, and I'll talk about the solution that we've tried to do to counterbalance that. Is the risk is you are losing control over your ability to handle your cash flow, because very, very few of us have it. We've borrowed the money in the first place to buy these properties, and they're usually big numbers. And so the banker basically controls the timing of when you can get your money. And if they want to extend the loan, great, they will. If they don't have to. And that's the little secret that doesn't normally come up, is that if a bank gets into trouble or if there's a liquidity crisis, they're calling their loans in. They want their money paid back. And if you have a lot of equity in the property, they have even more leverage over you. If you owe 60 cents on the dollar, and then they're going to just say, hey, just pay us, sell the property. You could lose your equity. I had a friend in 2007 or 8. I learned this just by talking to him. He owed, it was $1 million portfolio of rental properties, and he owed about $600,000 on to a commercial bank. They extended it for a little while. They said, we'll give you time to sell it. He tried to sell it at a full value, but he ended up having to dump it at a really low price and lose almost all of his equity because the timing was bad. He couldn't get another loan. So that is the risk. Now, we're entrepreneurs. We take risks, right? So it's not like you can't do those loans. We have tried to limit the number of exposures. So just don't have 100% of your loans be balloon notes with commercial banks. Maybe you do a little bit, maybe 20%, maybe 30%, and mix that with other types of loans. So we've had private loans from people's self-directed IRAs. We've had seller financing from the person who sold us the property. We tried hard to negotiate that. Sometimes we have to pay a little bit of a premium on the price. I'm not saying overpay for a property, but if we were going to pay $200,000, the property's worth $200,000, and our cash offer was $150,000. Maybe we offer to pay $160,000 if the seller will also hold some of the terms, and we can pay 10% down, and they'll carry the paper they'll carry back the note at 4% interest or something. So we've been able to negotiate some of those, sometimes having to give somewhere else. Like our private lenders, we might pay a 6% interest rate, whereas the commercial bank, we could get a 3.5% loan or a 4% loan. On paper, that seems ridiculous because that's 2% more on interest rate. You're not making as much money. But if you look at it from a risk mitigation standpoint, when the things get ugly, I feel much better about my private lender sitting across the coffee table or talking, because we're partners. We're essentially partners. We're going to work this thing out. And I don't feel the same way about a bank loan. And nothing against doing commercial loans, but I think that's in all of our portfolios, we look at that's a concern as we have volatility and things change. You just don't want to have one other third party, especially a corporation, have control over a lot of your portfolio.
And just to shift the topic just a little bit, so you're investing in Clemson, and you mentioned it's a college town. How big is the town?
About 15,000 people.
Okay, so not
there's a couple little towns. Yeah. 1,000 with the 2 towns next to it. So it's a very small town with a big university.
Gotcha. And are there enough rental properties to, consistently invest in your town to buy and rent out?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like a small pond. So we're sort of we're not even a big fish, but we're a medium-sized fish in a small pond. And so we've had enough, there's been enough to eat for us over the years, but we move slowly now. Like even though we have 110 units, we've gone in bursts, and, we go do nothing for a year or two, buy a bunch of properties in 1 or 2 years when the opportunities are right. We shift our strategy here and there. So I think I'm more of a fan of being a little small fish and buying here and there, and not trying to grow huge and scale and do that's a different game. I know there's people who do that, and they're syndicators. The people I have a heart for are the mom and pop investors who just need enough money to achieve financial independence. Yep. And I find for all of us who are in that category, keeping things simple and keeping things local, if possible. If you're in San Francisco and you can't buy an income property, you can go out of town. There are arguments for that, but staying somewhere, wherever you're investing, find the medium-sized city, find the small city in a metro area, like where I grew up in Noonan, Georgia. Atlanta's 6 million people. Noonan is this 100,000, or it's probably a 30,000 person town and a 100,000 person county about 30 miles outside of Atlanta. But it has a little character. It's got its community. It's got a court square. It's got a little walkable downtown. And I think there's so many Noonans and so many Clemsons and so many small areas outside the big cities. And fortuitously, that's also where a lot of people are going after the pandemic. They're getting out of the trend is getting out of the bigger cities. It was already that trend anyway, because millennials were wanting to buy houses. But that's where a lot of the deals happen to be. And you don't have to buy a bunch of properties to make it big. You can have a portfolio of 5 or 10 properties, get them paid off, pay for your bills for the rest of your life, and there you go.
Yeah. I invest in Albany, New York, which is the capital of New York State. And our it's really, there's 3 major cities, or major in quotation marks, but 3 decent sized cities with suburban counties in the outlying areas. And we're more populous than Clemson is, for sure, but not nothing huge. We're not New York City. We're not Los Angeles or San Francisco or any of those big cities. But we also have quite a few universities and colleges. And I know you mentioned that a lot of your rentals were at least college rentals. Mm-hmm. I've consciously intentionally stayed away from college rentals because I was fearing turnover and damage to my property from students acting stupid and having parties and all that. How have you dealt with that? Has that been an issue for you at all?
There is some more wear and tear because you have to turn it over probably on average every 2 years, maybe a little bit less than that. So people graduate. We have juniors who graduate, they live their junior and senior year, then they're done. We love the English majors and people who get a PhD in literature or something, stay for 5 or 6 years, or grad students at engineering. And we love it if we can get 5 or 7 years, but that doesn't happen very often. So the turnover is the negative. And so what that translates to in the bottom line is more maintenance. You're just going to have more, every time somebody turns over, you got to do touch-up paint. You got to, these things are going to break here and there. But there's some positives too. Like we almost always start renting our properties, or now our property managers do, starting in December or January of the year when the lease is coming up in August or July 31st. So it's very rare that we have any vacancies come August, because we have a long time to get that thing rented. And it just has to do with the cycle of what students in our town are looking for. They want to get things leased out, get it all done before they leave for the summer, and they know it's done. So that's a really big benefit as a landlord. It's not like you have a property that goes vacant and now you got to get it cleaned up and get it rented in the next 30 days, or you have to show the property before they move out. So it's a pretty nice part of the college student rental business. We've also had the tailwind of our university is growing. So we've had rents have gone up, demand's increased, but we've had fluctuations. A lot of big national developers are coming in building 700 bed, luxury student apartments. And so it's kind of like throwing a big rock in the pond. It shakes things up a little bit, but that's also why we've been happy with the lower priced multifamily rentals, because we're buying at a replacement cost that is, let's say $50 per square foot or $70 per square foot. The best they can do is build it for $110 to $120 a square foot. Here we are at half of what their cost is. So we've got a really good pricing advantage compared to people who are building new. And that means our prices are going up, but we're still very, very competitive on the price.
Makes sense. And I do want to dig in just a little bit on the management of your portfolio. Obviously, with over 100 units, I know you and your partner are out there swinging hammers and fixing and doing paint touch-ups, right?
No, I'm very not handy. So anybody out there who's not good at fixing stuff, you can join my club of the non-handy real estate investors. So, all right, we're good. We got 3 of us then, or 2 of us to start. But yeah, I I am pretty good at analyzing the property to understand what needs to be done. I do know, what we want, what kind of product we want when it's all said and done. But I love teams. I used to play sports in college. I'm a team player. I like to be the quarterback or the coach or whatever, and then let other people do their thing and be competent. So you hire a competent plumber, you hire a competent electrician, you hire a good painter, you hire a good property manager. You have a good relationship with these people. You try to communicate well, but then let them do their thing, and you hold them accountable to whatever they have to do.
And that shifts into lifestyle investing, right? So I know you mentioned to me personally offline here about, and I've heard you talk about this before, you actually took some time off, quite a lengthy period of time off from real estate. You and your family, you traveled to South America. How are you able to do that where you have such a large portfolio at home?
People is the short answer. Well, people is number one, and then systems would be the second part of that. So I did, my wife's a Spanish teacher, and I've always loved traveling and wanted to do more of it in college and didn't get to do a lot. So I've had that itch. And I think that's part of what attracted me to entrepreneurship, was that flexibility to travel and do things like that. And so we always knew, we traveled before we had kids, and we knew once we had kids that we particularly wanted them to learn Spanish and become fluent in Spanish early in their life. And so my younger daughter was 3, my older daughter was 5, and the whole year before that, we planned on moving out of our house that we live in, renting our house out. We planned on me not being local. So at the time I had an in-house kind of bookkeeper manager who did a lot of our work. So she was really awesome. And she was kind of my go-to person on the ground. And she checks the mail. She does most of our leasing in terms of showing apartments. And then I would be the one who would do everything remotely, signing leases, would still pay the bills. So I never outsourced any of that. But with technology and remote things, I could do that for an hour or two per week on a Thursday in Ecuador. And if you have good people on the ground who have some systems that you built ahead of time, so systems are just checklists and processes. And hey, when we turn over a property, is the list of things we want to do from a painting standpoint. Here's a list of things we want to do from handyman standpoint. Here's a list of cleaning things. We have a big long list. Clean this window, clean the baseboards, clean this bathroom this way. And so the book called The E-Myth, back when I first started my business, it was one of the biggest light bulb moments that he said, even if you're a small business, even if you're doing everything in your business, you need to treat it like you're not going to do it someday, and you need to start working in your business and on your business, meaning you're the one who's cleaning the bathroom maybe to start off, but make a checklist. Like, how would you do this bathroom if somebody else were going to do that? How would you do this bookkeeping if somebody else were going to do it? And so we built over time this operations manual, essentially just a book of checklists. And so when we hired a bookkeeper, we taught her our bookkeeping system. Here's how we do it. Now, feel free to improve upon it, make some suggestions. There's nothing perfect about this, but she came into a system that was already had some organization to it. And you can't believe how much people who work for you respect that. They're like, wow, that's very clear. I understand what you want. I understand the steps you take. So it not only makes it so that you get a better result, it makes their job easier, makes them feel more competent about you and what you're doing. And then it translates into a lifestyle business. At some point, when I traveled and I lived in Ecuador, I felt confident that there's things going on. I'd hired a good person to help me do things. There was systems set up, and then you add technology to that, the way it is today with remote technology and signatures that can be done on your phone. It's just a perfect storm for people who want to have a lifestyle business, traveling and doing whatever you want to do.
We're definitely at a point, at least I'm at a point with my business partner where over 50 units, it's really challenging because of all those things that you need to keep track of. And we've been talking and trying to figure out how we can get the bookkeeping part of this done. But the issue that I've come across is, how do you trust someone? Because I think in order to effectively do our bookkeeping and do all those things, I need to give them access to bank accounts. They need to have access to like all the numbers. How did you find that person? How were you feeling comfortable and confident that they are going to be trustworthy?
Yeah, that's definitely a concern. It's the reason, even though I trusted our person wholeheartedly, it was the reason I never, excuse me, I never turned over check writing abilities. And we always had restrictions on the bank account online that somebody else couldn't write a check from our online bank account. So I think that's, even when you trust somebody, they need to know up front that like, this is a line, that we don't cross that line. And I think you never give up the check writing ability. You never give up the permissions on your bank account. There's just too many things that can happen. My dad, when I worked with him for a year, he had a bookkeeper who stole over $10,000 in cash security deposits that people paid when they came in the office. And she was the one who was doing the bookkeeping. So she was able to hide those entries for a little while until Dad finally saw something weird and did some audits. And so I agree with you 100%. And the other answer that came to was this: do it in baby steps. Like, so we did a trial early on. Hey, let's just try checking the mail for us. Let's try doing this. In a big part of bookkeeping, there's the receivables and the payables. So the payables are all the bills that come in. Your contractor this week sends an email that says, "Hey, I did this work. It cost me $200. It cost $200. Here's my invoice." Well, she would get all those invoices for us because we had a dedicated email. She would go into our management software or our Quickbooks. She would enter those bills in. And so she's not touching the money. It just has to do with the bills. And then I would log in on Thursday, and here are the 10 bills that I need to pay. They've already been scanned, so I can look at them as well, and they're saved online. So that's just a lot of work. That's like 90% of the work is that. Yeah. But then I still keep an eye on it. I still, I can look at it and say, well, we need to make sure we label it this way. And so you're completely detached from the business, particularly with bookkeeping. But I think that's okay. Like, I think bookkeeping is the thing you never give up, surprisingly enough. I think you can give up contracting, you can give up management, you can give up all that stuff, but the money is that's the lifeblood. You always keep your pulse on that. And it's so I've jokingly, I'm a big Matrix nerd. Like, I love the movies, The Matrix.
Yeah.
So you too. So he would, remember when Nemo finally like saw the world for what the Matrix for what it was, he started seeing things in digital, like zeros and ones. And bookkeeping's kind of like that. Like, when you finally get your bookkeeping down, you can see your whole business from a single report. Right. And if all's well, you can see things pretty clear. It's okay, looks good. That's what we expected. But you start seeing exceptions every once in a while. You're like, wait a minute, we were supposed to get that much rent and we only got this much rent. Something's up. And so then you start asking questions. And so bookkeeping is one particular topic, but that was the one that I've always stayed involved in. And my bookkeeper is actually retired now. So I'm kind of going through withdrawal pains at the moment. I'm doing a lot of the bookkeeping, but not doing it as well. And I'm having to get back into the reconciliations and everything every month. But at some point we'll have the confidence to hire somebody else, or maybe I've tried to talk my wife into doing it, but she's not, I don't think I can do that.
Yeah.
Or my business partner's wife, but we'll see.
Yeah. Same here. My wife is an attorney too. So she's kind of like, no, I got my own stuff. I got plenty to do. You don't need to give me your stuff to do. What the software do you guys use for bookkeeping?
QuickBooks.
You do use QuickBooks. Okay. Are there templates? Did you set that up somehow so that it's, catered to rental real estate?
Yeah, I've got a book. I can go get it off the shelf. I've tried to find it for sale, but it was like a little workbook kind of thing called the Creative Real Estate Investor's Guide to Bookkeeping.
Oh man, okay.
And it's just look it up. Maybe I'll send you a picture of it afterwards.
All right, yeah.
I'm actually thinking about. I haven't done this yet. I used to teach a class in bookkeeping in my local RIA group, and I've had several people I've asked, and they're like, "Yeah, gosh, I need to learn exactly what you're saying. Like, what's the chart of accounts? How do I do an entry when I buy a property? How do I? I just want to see all the details." And for better or worse, I'm a bookkeeping nerd. So like, I've thought about doing a class on that, or a booklet or workbook or something, just to help people out and teach them how to do that. Because
my understanding is that QuickBooks is not designed. There's no presets for rental properties there, right? And so I've been using spreadsheets, and once you get past a certain point of number of buildings and units, it gets really complicated, just challenging, Absolutely. Just daunting. So
I recommend QuickBooks. I mean, there's no presets, but it's very flexible, and it's proven. People have done it before, and you can do the most complicated 1031 exchange entries, installment sales. You can do it all on QuickBooks, and there's tons of online forums and people who've done it before. So it's got its drawbacks, but I think QuickBooks is the way I would go for most rental property investors.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, Chad. So let's move on a little bit, sort of in our timeline, move forward a little bit. And I do want to talk about your book. This is Chad's book, Retire Early with Real Estate. I absolutely love this book. I've read it.
Thank you.
I've actually listened to it on audio, which Chad did an audio book version of this, but you can pick this up.
Southern accent and all, that's
Southern accent and all. You guys will talk about this for a minute, and if anyone's interested, you can pick it up on Bigger Pockets. I believe it's also on Amazon, and obviously this was published through Bigger Pockets. Is that right, Chad?
Correct. Yep. They're my partner on the book, and they published it and did a great job helping me out.
I can't say enough about Bigger Pockets. Chad and I first got in touch with each other on Bigger Pockets a while back. So, if anyone's not familiar with that site, definitely check it out. Sign up. Membership is free, and I think it's a really great resource. But Chad, tell me a little bit about kind of the impetus for the book. How did you come about? Why did you decide to write it, and what went into that?
Yeah, the topic, I'm an online kind of sphere of blogs and YouTubers and podcasters called the FIRE movement. It's basically financial independence, retire early. A lot of my friends, like the Mad Fientist, and I've met Mr. Money Mustache and Tanya Hester and different people who are into that movement. A lot of the ideas there have been inspiring, motivating, teaching people to not work their whole life. Why not, if you have the ability to, not everybody has the ability, but if you can save money, if you're in your 40s and you've saved a lot, invest it well so that you can then leave your job or work part-time or do things that matter to you. That's kind of the motto of the book, is doing what matters instead of waiting until you're in your 70s to do it, and then things might not work out. Your health might not work out, the timing might not work out. So the impetus was to do things sooner and get your finances in order. The difference is, though, there hadn't been a book about doing that with real estate. So I wanted to give a blueprint on, if you have that goal of doing more of what matters, of having lifestyle freedom and flexibility and travel, or giving back or contributing to your community, being a parent, whatever it is, how do you do that? And so I interviewed 25 different people who've been on different paths or stages to financial independence with real estate, showed all their numbers, how many rentals they had, what the numbers look like. And then I gave it's almost like you're climbing a mountain. So the blueprint is, you start at the bottom. If you're just starting and you're basic beginner, you're at the bottom of the mountain, all the way up to the top of the mountain, which is financial independence. And I give different routes up the mountain using real estate. For example, maybe you want to start by buying a house hack, moving into a duplex, living in one side, renting out the other side. It's a great way to get in the business by getting.
I started that way too.
That's how you did too? Okay,
Yep.
good.
Yep.
Yeah, I was a house hacker as well. And actually, I'm still a house hacker. We're renting Airbnb our basement on game day rentals. So
Nice.
it's So I took all of the strategies that people hear about a lot on Bigger Pockets in different places and tried to organize them in a fashion that you could say, here are great strategies for beginners. Here are great strategies for people who are in that kind of wealth building stage. And then something that's not talked about much is, what do you do when you have a big portfolio, you have more wealth? How do you transition into the point where you can actually live off your income and have it last for the rest of your life? That's an important consideration. So talking about risk and backup plans and flexibility and building an income floor, ideas of the book. How do you at least get a stable place where you have some, if it's not guaranteed income, it's kind of like a pension. It's basically, you've got that money coming in and it's not going anywhere, so that you can then travel. You can maybe work a job that you like that doesn't pay as much money. And so everything in between is what the book's about. And it's a lot of fun because everything I do writing wise or teaching is helping me learn as well. So it's forcing me to put some of the ideas I've learned from a lot of other people who I referenced in the book, and just organize it in a way that hopefully helps other people have the confidence to take that step and do it for themselves.
And there are a lot of really cool strategies that you talk about too, in different ways people can get started, different ways people can grow their portfolio. Do you want to just mention a couple of those from the book?
Yeah, one of my favorites, I mentioned house hacking. That's a great way to get started. At some point, people get into the stage where they have a property or two, and they want to start growing that wealth. Maybe they take a $50,000 nest egg they saved and turn that into $500,000 or $1 million. And one of my favorite ways to do that is just real simple: buy and hold rental properties, which I know you do as well. But then you can add some wrinkles to that. So let's say you get 5 rentals and you've 30-year mortgages on each one. Now, instead of trying to aggressively pay down all of those mortgages separately at one time, one thing we've learned from like the personal finance world is you can do what's called a debt snowball, where you take all of the income from all 5 of those properties and concentrate that income on one rental property at a time. And so instead of taking 30 years to pay off your mortgages, you can take all the income from the rentals plus any job savings you have and knock it out in 4 years, 5 years, by making an extra big mortgage payment. And once you pay that one off, now you freed up some cash flow from that first one. You can start attacking the second one, and it starts snowballing. By the 5th one, it takes a couple of years, or not as long to pay off. The point being, that's the rental debt snowball is a way to have the satisfaction of kind of making progress and also transitioning from being a wealth builder to actually having a free and clear property that produces a lot of income, that pays for your lifestyle, and also has is very low risk too, which I think is important to think about.
And I know you talk a lot about how you don't need to have a 100-unit portfolio or a 50-unit portfolio, depending on where you are in life, to actually be able to retire and be financially independent.
Yeah, and I mean, here I am talking about having 110 units, so that let's give some context to that. I have a business partner, and the two of us have been doing this full time professionally for years. But I think in between there's a happy place for everybody. You find a place that makes sense for you, and I just try to stand up for the people who have 5 rental units and they pay those off, and each one of them makes $1,000, and now they're making $5,000 a month. I did a survey along with this book. I asked people, how much do you think you need to live and to pay your bills and to be happy? And the number was like $50,000 to $75,000 across the country. And so I know,
which is not that much. It's reasonable.
Not that much.
Right?
Yeah, it's reasonable. I mean, and so some people might be starting and they got like $1,000 in the bank, or they owe a bunch of credit card debt, and they might think that's impossible to reach that point.
Right.
But it's more accessible. It's you can do that. People think, I could buy 5 rental properties. I already own 1 or 2. Right. And so I just want to remind people that it's okay to do that. Like it's inspiring to hear about 1,000 units or 110 units,
Grant Cardone
units.
style,
yeah,
right?
Grant Cardone, 10 exit, But there's a lot of quiet millionaires and quiet financial independence people who are too busy having fun, living life, contributing, doing what they want to do, to go out there and tell everybody how they're 10xing it. They're 10xing their time, their lifestyle, and that's, I think, is a pretty exciting idea. And putting real estate investing and money in its place. Like its place is to serve your life and to give you options and to give you time. And it's difficult sometimes. I know it is for me. I love business. I love entrepreneurship, to remind myself that, hey, this is a tool. That's it. It goes in the toolbox. Right. And I'm here to live. I'm here to live a good life. I'm here to be a dad. I'm here to help people and contribute and teach. And building a business helps people too. So I don't want to discount that. But it's not the path for everyone. You don't have to have 1,000 units to have the security and the lifestyle you need. And yet that's kind of the portrayal we get sometimes, is that until you have 1,000 units or until you 10x it, there's no security or independence. And that's just not the case. I mean, you can do really well, build a lot of wealth. And if this is not your thing, if growing to 100 units is not your thing, by all means, go do whatever else is important to you in life and live off those 5 units and be very happy.
I'm 100% guilty of that. For the last, I don't know how many years now, I've just been going all out. I work full time as an attorney. I have a rental portfolio that I'm growing with my business partner. We have, some side ventures and other sources of income. And now I'm doing YouTube. And, I'm just like, people ask me, do you sleep? And I say to them, not really, and it's not the place where I want to end, or continue with. I think it's important to have a balance, and I'm guilty as anyone of just going all out. I'm in that growth stage that you talk about in the book, where, I'm trying to accumulate the wealth that I will need to be able to pull back a little bit from what I'm doing. But it's not, it's tough sometimes.
Yeah. And I'm guilty too. Like, I'm going to raise my hand. Balance is one of those funny things. Like, I think a lot of us want it. I want it. But it's not an easy thing to say, here we go, I'm balanced. It's more of I think an evolution. And for me, at least, it has been, where I'm 100% in the stage where I've gone through these stages of grow, work. I mean, I'm putting in the 60 to 80 hour weeks, I'm going. But then I think that the thing that's helped me a little bit is to go back to why I'm doing this and reminding myself that, like, what does my business look like when I reach the destination? What does it look like at the top of the mountain? And like keeping that in mind and actually building the business around that picture, that the idea of the business, and then working it backwards and saying, all right, what would I have to do today to make my business look a little bit more like that business that I'm talking about and I'm thinking about? And then here's another key is like, that might take 10 years. Like it might take 15 years to get there exactly. And I'm still evolving too. Like I'm still trying to get better, but don't be afraid to take some sabbaticals, some mini retirements. That's been the saving grace for me, because for a type A person who's like good at building and who's good at selling and who's good, I'm good at going out and buying properties. That's what I'm good at. But like my wife and I said, why don't we just get away for 15, 17 months and take a break? And it's the go-getter part of my brain was like, wait a minute, like I'm missing out. I'm not going to be building anymore. It was, because I've done that several times now, easily the best thing for my health, for my relationship, for my business as well, is pressing pause, is being willing to slow down a little bit and take a break, take a pause. It helps you with just your personal, just perspective. It helps your family just to kind of take a break a little bit. But it also, I really do think it makes your business better, because as you step away from things, you get a perspective. It's almost like looking at it from a distance and you start saying, why am I doing that? Like that, I've just been doing that from rote memorization instead of being more deliberate about it. And so some of my best insights have been because I was willing to step away and press the brakes. And maybe it wasn't me. Like I think I have to give credit to my wife on that one for continuing to push us to take those breaks and press pause and be okay. And for me, like some of the cultures you get to visit teach you as much too. Like we're particularly fond of the Latin American culture. We spent a lot of time in Mexico, spent time in Ecuador and Argentina. And I just love some of the family-centeredness and some of the slowness that people build into their lives in Ecuador in particular, where we were. It was such a lesson for me coming from workaholic land, where it's like, just take a break, like enjoy life. And that was not always, still a bigger challenge is, can you be present? Can you enjoy this meal for the next hour or two? Yeah. Can you have a conversation with somebody and not worry about the next thing and the next thing?
Not look at your cell phone, right? To see who's texting me or what's the next email? Where's it coming from? Yeah.
It's challenging. I mean, and so if we're all like a work in progress, me first and foremost. But if we can look at it that way and say, growing wealth is one work in progress, but growing ourselves and our own mindset and our own personal growth is like, that's important too. And then be ambitious in that way. And you need time, you need space in order to improve yourself and your relationships and your family.
I think that's great advice. And, this whole interview has been awesome. I definitely appreciate it, Chad. One last question that I have for you, and we can wrap it up with this, is what's your one either most memorable deal that you've done, or the one that's, you're most proud of, or maybe it was most profitable?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some deals that definitely made good profits, and sometimes I think we all hear about the good deals, and so I think maybe I'll talk about a bad one.
Okay. Yeah.
It was memorable because we were able to work it out. Like it was a multi-unit property. It was one of our first small multi-units, but it was right at the end of 2007. So I told everybody earlier about that whole period, and it was like the 33rd deal of 2007 where, we were just already buying too much stuff. And I was I talked to a seller. He was in bankruptcy. And he owned this multi-unit property. He'd not done enough repairs to it, and he was about to lose the property. And I just felt bad for him. Gosh, this guy's going through a tough time. And he told me about the bankruptcy auction, which I'd never been to before. And it was you bid basically. Investors who show up there bid to pay off the creditors who this debtor owed money to. And part of the plan was I kind of got the mistakes I made were, got emotionally involved. I went there and I thought, I was going to buy it and then sell back some of the property to him because he was going to get some proceeds above and beyond the debt. And there's another investor who showed up there and wanted me to essentially was like, oh, don't bid against each other. Like he's basically trying to collude. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not doing that. And so long story short, I ended up bidding, but I got emotional in my bidding, bid more than what I originally thought I was going to do. So big mistake, right? So we bought the property, we got it under contract at that auction, and still the end of the story was I was able to get some financing, which was kind of tough at that time. Had a private lender who loaned us the money, The property needed a ton of work, so we had to put a bunch of our extra money into it to fix it up. We had to stabilize, like there was a lot of vacant properties. So we went through all sorts of, first of all, I was making a mistake, overpaying some, the bad timing, buying the property that needed a bunch of work, a lot of turnover. But we were able to, a year later, sell half of the property. It was 2 different multi-unit properties together in one deal. We sold half of it to like recoup some of our money, and we had to hustle to do that. We ended up keeping the rest of the property for another 5 or 6 years. Once the downturn got done, we sold that property too, fixed it up. We made like $20,000
for all that work,
this entire property,
yeah,
for all that work. Yeah. And it couldn't have begun to pay for my time and what I did. But I think that what I'm proud about that is, and maybe the message for everybody, is that you're going to make mistakes. Like you're going to do things wrong. How you respond to those and how you deal with them is going to be pretty much the telling factor. That was our telling factor. That deal right there was make or break. Like it could have been, me hiding from the mistake, complaining about it. But it was like, all right, all hands on deck. Let's figure this out. My business partner was gracious enough not to totally criticize me for screwing up, but we got together, we teamed up, we made it happen. And you can do that in entrepreneurship. Sometimes it might get worse. Sometimes you might fail even worse than what we did. But you got to be prepared for that with real estate. You're not going to be immune from it. I'm sure you've made mistakes too. Like we've all made mistakes, and you're not going to be the first one to make one, you're not going to be perfect either.
Right.
And so if you all just realize that when you're getting into investing, then you're going to get some good deals too. But if you can deal with the worst ones, then hey, you can handle it.
I love that. Great advice, Chad. So with that, let's bring the interview to a close. Why don't you tell people where they can find you, and reach out to you if they have questions or they want to connect.
Sure. My home on the internet is coachcarson.com. So I have a blog there, newsletter, and actually, like you, I'm trying to be pretty active on YouTube as well. So if you just search Coach Carson on YouTube, I post a new video every Friday. Some of them are sort of vlog style, where I'm just going into a rental property we're looking at. Other ones are me getting a little whiteboard and drawing how to analyze a deal or something. But I would love to, whatever floats your boat. If you're a YouTuber or you like listening to podcasts or blogs, I'd love to connect with you either way.
I'll put links to all of Chad's channels and websites down below, as well as his book. And Chad, with that, thanks a lot. Thanks so much for coming on, and it was a pleasure talking to you today.
Really enjoyed it, Vitaly. Thanks for having me and inviting me to talk.
Yeah, we'll talk soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.